She looked him straight in the eye and told him to leave. No reason. No apology. No shame. She had no idea she was refusing service to Denzel Washington, and she definitely didn't know who was watching. But someone was. And that one moment, that one cruel lie, would trigger a storm no one saw coming. This isn't just a story about fame, it's about justice. But here's the real question. What if the person who stood up for Denzel was the last one you'd expect? It started like any ordinary day. Denzel Washington, known not just for his powerful roles but also for his humility, stepped into a quiet, upscale restaurant tucked away in a peaceful corner of Savannah, Georgia. He wasn't in a tuxedo or under bright lights. No entourage. Just Denzel, a man who preferred real moments over red carpets. He had just wrapped a long week of filming and wanted nothing more than a quiet table, a good meal, and a moment of peace. He wore a plain grey hoodie, jeans, and a soft expression, the kind that made you think he was just another traveler passing through. The restaurant wasn't packed. There were at least 5 empty tables near the windows, a few couples enjoying their wine, and soft jazz playing in the background. The host had just stepped away, so Denzel waited patiently near the front. That's when she walked in, a woman in her late 20s, wearing a crisp white blouse and a bitter look. She wasn't the owner, just one of the servers. Her name Tigreed Emily. From the moment her eyes landed on Denzel, something shifted. Her brows furrowed. She didn't smile. Instead, she walked straight toward him with a frown on her face and arms crossed tight over her chest. Before Denzel could even greet her, she spoke. "We're full," she said bluntly. No greeting, no check for a reservation, no explanation. Her words hung in the air like smoke. Denzel looked around, confused but calm. He gestured politely toward the empty tables. "I don't mind waiting," he offered. But she cut him off. "We don't serve walk-ins. You need to leave." Her voice was flat, her tone final. She turned away as if he didn't exist. Denzel stood still. Not angry. Just quiet. His hands stayed by his sides, eyes soft but focused. Anyone else might have raised their voice, but not him. He had been through worse. He knew when something deeper was going on, and this wasn't about a reservation. This was something else. Something uglier. He took a deep breath and stepped back, giving her space. "Okay," he said softly, "I'll wait outside." Behind him, a couple walked in and were greeted with a smile. "Welcome. Right this way." Emily beamed at them. She seated them right by the window, one of the very spots Denzel had been standing near just minutes before. The contradiction was obvious. But Denzel didn't say a word. Not yet. What no one realized was that someone else had seen everything. A woman in the far corner, sipping from a delicate wine glass, had watched the whole exchange. Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. She leaned forward in her chair, eyes locked on Denzel, then flicked to the waitress. Her fingers slowly reached for her phone. Outside, Denzel stood near a tree, calm but distant. The late afternoon sun filtered through the branches, casting shadows across his face. He wasn't looking for pity. He didn't need a scene. But inside that restaurant, something had begun to shift. And the woman with the wine glass was about to change everything. She stood up slowly. Not many noticed her. She wasn't flashy. Mid-30s, brown curls tucked into a bun, a leather jacket draped over her chair. She walked to the hostess stand just as the host returned. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Who trained your servers?" she asked. The host blinked. Well, corporate does," he stammered. "Why?" She leaned in just slightly and said 7 words that would alter the course of everyone's day. "Because one of them just made a mistake." The hostess didn't know what to say. Her eyes darted toward the dining room, then toward the woman in front of her. There was something about the woman's voice, not loud, not angry, but sharp and full of purpose. Before she could respond, Emily, the same server who had turned Denzel away, appeared again, unaware she was being watched. "Do you need help?" she asked the hostess. The woman with the wine glass looked at Emily closely, then smiled. "Actually, yes," she said. "You can help me understand something." Emily raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. I just saw you refuse service to a man who was standing here 10 minutes ago. You told him you were full. But then I watched you seat a couple right after. Why is that? Emily's face shifted instantly. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We don't owe service to everyone, she replied coldly. We have policies. Denzel, still outside, glanced through the glass. He could see the woman talking to the staff. He didn't know who she was. He didn't even know he was the reason she had gotten up. But something told him this wasn't over. Inside, the hostess nervously glanced between them. Emily kept her composure, but there was tension behind her eyes. The woman leaned in just a bit closer. I want you to know I recorded what you said to him, she said. And I'll be showing it to someone very important. Someone who signs your paycheck. Emily laughed, but it wasn't real. You think you can scare me? She snapped. I've been here for 3 years. I know the rules. And I know who belongs here and who doesn't. At that moment, something shifted in the air. A manager appeared, sensing the conflict. His name was Darren, a man with neatly combed hair and a pressed shirt. Is there a problem here? He asked with a rehearsed smile. The woman turned toward him. Yes. A guest was denied service, and I'd like to know why. Darren blinked. I'm sorry to hear that. Who was the guest? She pointed outside the window. Darren followed her gaze and froze. His jaw clenched ever so slightly. That's Denzel Washington, he whispered under his breath. The woman's eyes didn't move. Yes, it is. And your server told him to leave. Darren turned slowly toward Emily. Her face had gone pale. It's not my fault, she blurted. He didn't look like he belonged here. I didn't recognize him. The words echoed across the room like a dropped plate. A few diners nearby turned their heads. The woman didn't speak right away. She just looked at Emily with calm disappointment. You judged a man by his clothes, by his skin, by your own idea of worth, she said. And you didn't even bother to ask his name. Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Darren looked cornered. Please, he said quickly. Let's take this to the back. We can sort this out. We don't want to cause a scene. But it was too late. The scene had already been made. Denzel, still standing outside, took a slow breath. He hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. He simply waited, arms crossed, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. Inside, the woman held up her phone. I'm going to send this to corporate, she said. And depending on how they respond, I'll decide what happens next. Darren looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. Who are you? He asked, trying to stay calm. The woman gave a small smile but didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked out the front door. As she passed Denzel, she gave him a small nod. Not of pity, but of respect. Wait here a bit longer, she said quietly. Trust me. Denzel raised an eyebrow, then gave her a slight nod in return. He didn't know her name, but he saw something in her eyes that made him believe. Emily watched from inside, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she looked unsure. The other staff members whispered behind the counter. News travels fast in a place like that. And something told them this was no ordinary mistake. 20 minutes passed. Denzel remained outside, now seated on a bench near the tree. A young boy passed by and did a double take. Are you Denzel Washington? He asked shyly. Denzel smiled. I am. The boy grinned, then ran to tell his parents. More people began to recognize him. But still, he waited. Still, he said nothing about what had happened. Not to the crowd, not to the press that began to gather, not even to the local reporter who showed up with a camera. And then, the woman returned. But she wasn't alone. Behind her came 2 suited men, clearly from corporate. Their presence caused an instant ripple inside the restaurant. Darren turned white. Emily backed up. The guests looked around, confused. The woman stepped forward, now flanked by the 2 men, and asked a single question. Is this how you treat all guests who don't fit your vision of acceptable? Darren stuttered. Emily remained frozen. One of the suited men pulled out a clipboard and began writing something down. The woman turned to the diners and raised her voice. I want you all to know, what happened here today isn't just wrong. It's dangerous. It sends a message that some people don't deserve kindness unless they're recognized. That ends now." Outside, Denzel finally stood up. The doors opened. One of the suited men stepped outside and invited him in. But Denzel didn't move right away. He looked through the glass one last time, not at the staff, but at the woman who had spoken up. He gave her a single nod. A nod that said, "I see you." Then he stepped forward, into the restaurant that had once refused him. And everything changed. The woman didn't leave the restaurant right away. After the corporate suits entered and began their quiet but serious conversations with the staff, she walked back to her corner table and sat down again like nothing had happened. Her wine glass remained half full, her plate barely touched. She looked around, watching how everyone else reacted. The guests, the waiters, even the cooks who peeked through the kitchen window. Tension was thick in the air, but she remained calm, like she had seen this all before. A few people started whispering, some checking their phones. News spread fast these days, especially when a celebrity like Denzel Washington was involved. But this moment wasn't just about fame. It was about something deeper. A test of who people were when no one was supposed to be watching. And it turned out, someone was watching all along. Her name was Vanessa Fields. She wasn't just any customer. She was the silent force behind the success of the very restaurant that had just disgraced itself. Vanessa had started from nothing. Her parents were factory workers, and she grew up understanding what it felt like to be invisible in places like this. She worked her way through college, took out loans, skipped vacations, and poured everything into building a restaurant chain that prided itself on inclusion and dignity. She'd opened her first spot in Atlanta, then Savannah, then Charleston. Her rule was always clear: treat every guest like they belong, no matter what. No exceptions. But lately, she'd started to worry that some of her own staff had forgotten that. That's why she'd come in that day unannounced, dressed simply, with no fanfare. She didn't want them to know who she was. She wanted to see the truth. And what she saw was worse than she expected. Watching Denzel, a man she admired not just as an actor but as a human being, being dismissed so coldly lit something inside her. It wasn't just the act itself. It was how casual it was. As if turning someone away based on a glance was normal. As if kindness had to be earned. Vanessa didn't believe in big speeches or dramatic reactions. She believed in actions that mattered. That's why, when she made the call to corporate, she didn't ask for a temporary fix. She asked for a full investigation. A full review of every manager, every complaint, every report filed and ignored. And she asked to keep it quiet for now, because she had something more powerful in mind than just public punishment. As she sat at her table, the restaurant continued to swirl with tension. The two corporate men took Emily and Darren to the back, where a meeting began behind closed doors. Other employees stood silently, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. Denzel remained seated now, inside the restaurant, in a private corner. He had accepted the offer to come in, not for the food, but because he wanted to hear what the woman had to say. Vanessa finally stood and walked toward him. She didn't bring attention to herself. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked over and pulled out the chair across from him. They didn't speak for a few seconds. Just silence. Denzel looked at her closely, trying to read her. Vanessa looked right back, steady and sincere. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm not the one who treated you that way, but I built this place. And I need to own what happens in it." Denzel nodded slowly. "I figured you had something to do with it," he said. "You walked in like you already knew the ending." Vanessa smiled gently. "Not the ending. Just the truth. And the truth hurts more when it comes from your own people." She reached into her purse and placed a small leather card on the table. "This is my direct number. Not a manager. Not a PR person. Me. If you ever feel that we've failed again, you call me." Denzel looked at the card, then placed his hand over it. "You handled it with grace," he said. "A lot of people would have wanted cameras. Apologies on social media. Something loud." Vanessa nodded. "Loud fades. Quiet change sticks." Denzel leaned back and looked around. You think that girl will learn anything from this? Vanessa didn't answer right away. I don't know. But I'll make sure the next one we hire understands what this place is supposed to be. Meanwhile, behind the closed doors, Emily's voice had turned shaky. She had gone from defensive to desperate. I didn't mean it like that, she insisted. I just didn't know who he was. One of the corporate men leaned in. That's the problem. You thought you had to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Darren stayed quiet. He already knew his time was up. He had ignored complaints in the past. Now they had caught up to him. In less than 30 minutes, the two of them were asked to hand over their badges and leave quietly out the side exit. No shouting. No second chances. Just a closed door behind them. Back at the table, Denzel finished his drink and stood up. Vanessa stood too. They didn't need a handshake or a photo. Just a silent understanding between two people who had seen both sides of humanity. As he walked toward the door, he passed the new hostess, a young woman named Layla who had just started that week. She looked nervous. Denzel gave her a warm smile. You're doing fine, he said. Just remember who you're really serving. She nodded, eyes wide, not quite sure what he meant, but knowing it mattered. Vanessa remained at the table a few minutes longer, watching the space settle into silence. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. The video would eventually get out. The news would find it. But for now, she wanted the change to start here, with the people, not the headlines. One action at a time. The woman didn't leave by morning. The footage had spread like wildfire. What had started as a quiet act of ignorance inside one restaurant turned into a national moment of reflection. The video showed the moment Denzel was turned away, the empty tables behind him, and the waitress's dismissive tone. But what shocked people most wasn't just the discrimination. It was what happened next. The calm woman who rose from her seat, the subtle confrontation, the professionalism with which she spoke. And then her return, not as a guest, but as the owner of the very place that had failed. Most people didn't even know who Vanessa Fields was before the clip. Now, her name was trending. People weren't just applauding what she said, they were sharing their own stories of times they had been looked down on or turned away, simply for not looking the part. But what none of them knew yet was what Vanessa did after the cameras stopped. While the world online exploded, Vanessa was in the office upstairs, going through records, staff files, complaint logs, hiring practices. She had one goal, to clean the rot from the inside. It wasn't enough to fire a few bad apples. She wanted to know how deep it went. She started calling every regional manager, asking direct questions. Some answered with honesty. Others hesitated, and that told her everything she needed to know. She wasn't just running restaurants now. She was running damage control. But even more than that, she was seeking the truth. Later that week, Vanessa called a staff meeting at the Savannah location. No cameras. No reporters. Just the employees. She stood at the front, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, no makeup, no fanfare. Most of them hadn't seen her like this. She didn't speak like a boss. She spoke like someone who cared. She told them what happened. Not just the Denzel incident, but the mistakes they'd made along the way. Missed signs. Ignored complaints. Silent prejudice. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She asked them all one question: what kind of place do you want this to be? The room was quiet. Some looked down. Some nodded slowly. Others were crying. And when she was done, she said, if you want to stay, you stay because you believe we can do better. If you don't, I won't stop you from walking away. 10 people quit that day. Not because they were guilty, but because they knew they couldn't match the standard Vanessa was setting. She respected their choice. Then, with those who remained, she began again. Retraining. Listening. Rebuilding. She made it personal. Every staff member had to spend a day working the floor, no matter their role. Even the office managers had to bus tables. She called it Reset Week. Some rolled their eyes. But others found something different in it. Humility. Empathy. The kind of lessons no handbook could teach. Meanwhile, Denzel stayed silent. No posts. No interviews. Nothing. People expected a statement. Some even criticized him for not speaking out. But he didn't need to. His silence said everything. The restraint. The grace. It made people look inward, not just outward. And while everyone else was reacting, he was watching. He had been in this world long enough to know that real change doesn't come from the noise. It comes from quiet actions that ripple over time. And then, 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Vanessa got a call from Denzel's team. Not a complaint. Not a threat. A request. He wanted to meet again. Privately. No media. No one else. She agreed. They met in a small room behind the restaurant, where nobody would bother them. Denzel sat down with the same calm he had carried that day, but this time there was something more in his eyes. A question. Not about what happened to him, but about what she planned to do next. He asked her, "What does this moment mean to you?" Vanessa didn't answer right away. Then she said, "It means I had blind spots. It means my house wasn't as clean as I thought it was. And it means I can't pretend anymore." Denzel nodded. "That's the kind of honesty people don't usually share once the cameras are rolling," he said. She replied, "That's why I don't want the cameras. I just want to fix it." They talked for almost an hour. Not about lawsuits or headlines. About stories. About respect. About how many people face these kinds of moments and don't have someone like her watching. And that's when Denzel made a quiet offer. He didn't want money. He didn't want a nameplate. He wanted to partner with her, to help develop a new training program for the entire restaurant chain, built not just on customer service, but on human decency. He wanted to bring in voices that hadn't been heard. People from different backgrounds. Not just celebrities. Everyday people. Real stories. Real lessons. Vanessa was stunned. "You'd do that?" she asked. "After the way you were treated?" Denzel smiled. "Because of how I was treated," he said. "And because of how you responded." That was the moment things shifted. It wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about leadership. The kind that doesn't hide behind press releases. The kind that steps into the mess and gets to work. The next day, Vanessa called a nationwide meeting with all restaurant leaders on video. She introduced Denzel as her new partner in reform. She told them, "We can't undo what happened, but we can decide what happens next." Screens lit up with surprised faces. But no one objected. They could all see what this meant. This wasn't a stunt. This was the beginning of something bigger. The news finally hit the national channels. Clips of the incident were shown next to headlines like "Denzel Washington denied service" and "Restaurant owner responds with bold action." Talk shows began debating the meaning of what had happened, with guests arguing about race, celebrity, and how everyday people are treated when no one is watching. But while the world buzzed with hot takes and hashtags, inside the restaurant chain's headquarters, the pressure was real. The corporate team scrambled to keep up. Vanessa's quiet leadership had started a wave of accountability, but not everyone welcomed it. Some longtime executives tried to push back. They whispered about her being too emotional or overreacting. But Vanessa didn't care. She had seen the truth. She had watched one of the most respected men in the world be dismissed like a nobody. And if it could happen to him, what did that say about how her company treated people who didn't have a famous name? The training program she and Denzel designed was launched within a week. They called it See the Soul, and it focused not just on customer service but on empathy, cultural awareness, and decency. It wasn't about memorizing scripts. It was about understanding people. It featured short films, real-life testimonials, and even anonymous stories from guests who had felt dismissed in the past. The rollout began quietly, with managers required to go through it first. Some cried during the videos. Some walked out of the room. One manager resigned mid-session, admitting he couldn't lead people through something he didn't believe in. Vanessa accepted every resignation without anger. She wasn't looking to punish anyone. She was looking for truth. And sometimes, truth meant letting go. In the middle of all this, Emily, the waitress who had denied Denzel, spoke up. She posted a video online, tearfully apologizing. She said she had no idea who he was and didn't mean to be hurtful. But her voice shook as she admitted something deeper, that she had been raised with a certain mindset, that she had made assumptions about who deserved to be in certain spaces, and that Denzel's calm response had made her feel ashamed in a way she hadn't expected. The video received mixed reactions. Some people were angry, calling her apology too little, too late. Others said her honesty took courage. But what mattered more than the comments was what she did next. Emily reached out to Vanessa directly. She didn't ask for her job back. She just asked to meet. Vanessa agreed to the meeting but made it clear it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about accountability. They met in a quiet cafe away from cameras. Emily looked nervous, thinner, eyes tired. Vanessa listened without interrupting as she explained how the incident had opened her eyes. Emily confessed that she had judged Denzel not just because he wasn't dressed up but because she had felt insecure around people who didn't look like her. Vanessa didn't let her off the hook. She made it clear that ignorance wasn't an excuse. But she also told Emily that growth only begins when we stop defending the wrong things. That meeting didn't end in hugs or photo ops. It ended in a long silence, followed by a quiet thank you. Emily walked away with a long road ahead of her, but at least she was walking in the right direction. Meanwhile, Denzel remained in the background. He didn't post. He didn't speak at events. But he kept meeting with Vanessa, helping her build the foundation of something better. He asked for nothing. No name on the program. No credit. Just progress. And slowly, people began to notice. Guests started commenting on how different the staff felt. More present. More patient. One woman wrote a letter after being treated with such care by a young server that she cried in her car afterward. She said no one had looked her in the eye like that in years. It was working. Quietly. Slowly. But it was working. Then came the public forum. Vanessa agreed to one interview, a live one. Not with a big network, but with a local station that had covered the incident from the start. She wanted it to be raw, not polished. The host asked her why she was doing all this when she could have just fired the staff and moved on. Vanessa looked directly into the camera and said, "Because that would have been easy. And easy doesn't fix what's broken." She spoke about Denzel. About what he didn't say. About how his silence had spoken louder than any press release ever could. She ended the interview with a message not to the media, but to her staff. "We're not here to be perfect," she said. "We're here to be better." That same night, Denzel made a quiet appearance at a charity event in Atlanta. He was asked about the restaurant story by a young reporter. For the first time, he responded. Just 10 words. She did more than fix it. She changed it all. No one asked him to say more. They didn't need to. The clip went viral within hours. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. People were tired of apologies. Tired of shallow gestures. They wanted proof that people could change, that businesses could learn, that quiet strength still mattered. And in this story, they found it. Weeks passed. The world moved on, as it always does. Another scandal took over the headlines, another viral moment pushed this one aside. But inside the restaurant that had once turned away Denzel Washington, things were not the same. The air felt different. The staff was smaller, tighter, more focused. The new hires were trained under the See the Soul program and were chosen not just for their experience, but for their values. There was no ceremony, no grand reopening. The place simply reopened its doors each day with quiet purpose. And then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, the front door opened and in walked Denzel Washington once again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He wore the same simple hoodie and jeans. No cameras followed him. No one from the press had been tipped off. He had come alone, like before. The hostess, a young woman named Naomi, greeted him with a warm smile. She didn't gasp or freeze or fumble. She simply said, "Welcome in. Would you like a booth or a table?" Denzel smiled back. "Booth, please." He was led to the back corner, the very same corner where Vanessa had once sat and watched injustice unfold. Naomi brought him water, a menu, and space. She didn't crowd him. She didn't try to impress him. She simply did her job, with care. When she returned to take his order, Denzel asked, "What's your favorite thing on the menu?" Naomi lit up. "The lemon grilled chicken. It's simple, but the flavor's clean. I eat it every shift." Denzel nodded. "Then I'll have that." As he waited, he glanced around the restaurant. It looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The energy was grounded. The noise level soft. Staff helped each other without eye rolls or groans. A young waiter assisted an elderly man at another table, crouching beside him to explain the specials. A cook stepped out from the kitchen briefly to thank a guest who had complimented the food. Small things. But real. And that's when Vanessa appeared again, this time not as a mystery guest or a corporate fixer, but as a leader who had stayed. She didn't approach Denzel right away. She waited, watching for the right moment, the same way she had the first time. After he finished his meal, she walked over and stood beside the booth. "Good to see you again," she said softly. Denzel looked up and smiled. "It's different now," he said. She nodded. It had to be. He pushed the empty plate slightly forward and gestured to the staff moving around them. "You didn't just fix the service. You changed the spirit." Vanessa sat across from him and folded her hands. "I learned a lot," she said. "About how easy it is to build walls without realizing it. And how hard it is to tear them down once they're built." Denzel looked at her with quiet respect. "You stayed," he said. "A lot of people would have walked away after the storm passed." "I couldn't," she answered. "I created the space where it happened. I had to stay long enough to rebuild it." They didn't speak for a long moment. The silence between them was calm, not awkward. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows in soft patterns. Inside, the staff moved with purpose, unaware that one of the most famous men in the world was sitting quietly at a booth. Vanessa reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. "These are letters from the team," she said. "Each one wrote you something after going through the new program. They wanted to thank you, but they didn't know how." Denzel took the envelope and placed it inside his coat. "I'll read them later," he said. "Probably with some tears." Vanessa smiled. "That makes two of us." As he stood to leave, Naomi returned with the check, but Denzel gently pushed it back. "Already taken care of," Vanessa said. "You've given us more than you know." Denzel thanked her, placed his hand briefly on her shoulder, then turned to leave. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back. "You know," he said, "it's funny. The first time I walked in here, I was invisible. This time, I didn't need to be seen to be served. That's the difference." Vanessa stood there for a while after he left. She didn't rush back to her office. She didn't check her phone. She simply stood, taking in what had just happened. A quiet return. A silent resolution. No headlines. No viral videos. Just a full-circle moment between two people who had seen the worst and chosen to build something better out of it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalk was wet, shining in the streetlights. Denzel walked alone, no umbrella, his steps calm. And as he disappeared around the corner, the weight of what had happened lingered, not in the noise, but in the quiet. Not in the shout of justice, but in the whisper of dignity restored. What was left unsaid between them said the most. That real change is quiet. That grace can echo longer than rage. And that sometimes, the most powerful moments are the ones no one captures on camera.